Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the fourth session of the day at the 13th edition of the Apeejay Kolkata Literary Festival. We are about to witness So Bollywood in this session titled A Smorgasbord of Cinematic Delights. The session will be centered around the book A Place in My Heart. This book is a listicle and a celebration of the power of storytelling. Shah Rukh Khan is here, so are Super Deluxe and the Cannes Film Festival. A Place in My Heart is a blend of recommendations and remembrance, nostalgia, and narratives. The author of this book and the speaker for today is an Indian author, journalist, and film critic. She is the founder and editor of the entertainment journalism platform Film Companion. Welcome to the virtual platform, Anupama Chopra. Anupama Chopra will be in conversation with the film journalist, freelance writer, and film festival director at New York Indian Film Festival, Aseem Chhabra. He has been published in the New York Times, the Boston Globe, the Philadelphia Inquirer, Outlook, Mirror, Mumbai Mirror, Rediff.com. We are excitedly looking forward to this session. Over to you, Aseem.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the APJ Lit Fest and Oxford bookstores. And hello, Anupama. At least we can see each other virtually. Unfortunately, we weren't able to sit together and have this conversation. How are you?
I am well, Aseem, and yes, I would have so loved to sit in a 100-year-old bookstore. I've never been to the Oxford bookstore in Calcutta, and I would have just loved to be there, but let's make the most of it.
I know it's a beautiful bookstore, and we're going to be discussing your fabulous new book, A Place in My Heart. It's a lovely title, by the way, and I love the cover, and it's very simple, black and white. But congratulations. So, Anupa, how many books have you written? As I was telling you earlier, I have about 4 of them with me.
So I think truthfully, the ones you have, so which is Sholay, Shah Rukh, DDLJ, and now A Place in My Heart, are the ones that are sort of written. The others, of which I think there are also 4, are more compilations. So it's like the interviews I did on my show, The Front Row. It's a compilation of all the work I'd done, starting with like the text pieces I wrote for India Today magazine 25 years ago. So generally speaking, off the top of my head, I can't tell you the exact number.
Yeah.
I think कुछ 7-8 हैं. But like I said, those ones are not like written from scratch. Those are sort of compilations of my earlier work.
But I'm really impressed, of course, at the time when you wrote that Sholay book and even the Shah Rukh Khan book, you must have totally dedicated yourself. But even now, you're so busy with your Film Companion show. You're doing all these major interviews. Pre-pandemic times, you were traveling to various film festivals, interviewing people, doing your weekly film reviews. And I don't know what all is involved in the kind of projects you work on, and the film festival, my God, Mami, of course, which you run, the Geo Mami Film Festival. And then you were able to write a book like that, where you put together, I think, a list of, there are over 40 films, which of course are meant a
51,
lot.
51
films. Okay, films. I should have counted properly.
Yeah.
And on top of that, there are about 4 or 5 film personalities who mean a lot to you in the Indian film industry, Bollywood mostly. Where do you find the time to do all of this? I'm so impressed with your energy level.
Thank you, Aseem. So I have to tell you, even though it's probably unhealthy, but I really love what I do, and I just I don't know. So in the pandemic, like pehle na, I used to wake up at 6 o'clock. Then through the pandemic, I said, okay, no, let me see if I can bring this up to like 5:30. And my husband was like, are you like, what are you smoking? Because the whole world is under lockdown. Why do you need to wake up even early? And I was like, I just feel like those are the only things I can control. If I can do the work, I really, really want to do it. And truthfully, the book is not a book planned in the pandemic. My editor, Millie Aishwarya, and I met in February before the pandemic hit India. And we sort of, we said that, okay, I'm going to do this book and I'm going to approach it like this. And it's going to be called A Place in My Heart. That was all decided. And then I think genuinely, through the lockdown, I just found the time, because there was time. I mean, truthfully, like that first lockdown, which was
Yeah.
so absolute,
Right. Right. Right.
and there were, of course, पहले तो I think for the first month and a half, 6 weeks or so, तो फिल्में भी नहीं थी, कुछ नहीं था
Didn't step out at all. You could be
at all.
arrested. Yeah.
Exactly. So a lot of it was done at that time, but it wasn't planned as a pandemic book. But in my life, truthfully, I think just because I love this so much, it doesn't feel like work. Yeah, it's so much fun, and you have the same fun that I do.
Yeah, but you have so much fun that you write that one time at the Cannes Film Festival, while you were in the jury and doing all of the work, you fainted watching Spielberg's Indiana Jones. I mean, you forgot to eat, I would imagine, or sleep. Sleep is, of course, the problem.
See, the thing is, I'm vegetarian, right? Or I'm talking now about, this was what, 2008. So it wasn't like there was a whole bunch of vegetarian options. Also, I'm gluten-free, so those damn baguettes also wouldn't work for me.
Oh, God.
Naito, you know how can works. You just grab one of those and you're on the run.
Right.
So kuch kha nahi rahe ho, you're sleeping very little, and then you also have to keep that fashion quotient a little high, because you can't look completely sloppy. So I was in this like massive Abu Sandeep anarkali, and then I stood up, and then I just like fell. It was actually high comedy.
The dress was also probably very heavy. It must have weighed a lot. So let's talk about the book. What I find fascinating is, before you approach anything, before you even write about Amitabh Bachchan, you write about a film called Sholay. That's your number one book, the first chapter.
Yeah.
And so obviously, a lot of thought goes into how the chapters are arranged. Tell us about why. I mean, I know you did your book on Sholay is one of the masterpieces, really. It's a book that I think everybody should read, because it's full of anecdotes and stories, and you really learn so much about. Actually, I'm not a huge fan of Sholay, but your book really makes you love the film, really like the film that much, But tell us about why, first and foremost, you approached Sholay.
Because I felt, Aseem, even though what I wanted to do in this book is not talk about titles that I've talked about already, because it doesn't make sense. There's another book I've done is I used to do a column for Mumbai Mirror called 100 Films to See Before You Die. And there is a compilation of that. The book is titled that. So I didn't want to talk about those same films again, because I've done that. But I just felt with Sholay, so many people now, Aseem, don't know the importance and the impact of that film. Forget watching it. वो तो दूर की बात है. Like we have like, the young kids at Film Companion, some of the interns, when I asked them, like, where does your film, your sense of cinema begin? And they were like, K3G. And I was like, oh my God. So I just felt like if I can sort of bring back a little bit of a sense of what that film did and how much it impacted Hindi cinema through the decades, and how we're still referencing it, and still talking about those characters. I thought maybe, who knows, maybe I'll convert a few.
Yeah, actually, I should have asked this question first that I'm going to ask right now. Your first sentence in your introduction is that you fell in love with Bollywood summer of 1989. I mean, you're very precise there. Tell us what happened at that time period. What did you see?
What happened, Aseem, was that I got a job with Movie Magazine. Okay, so I finished. I was at the St. Xavier's College. I did, I did English literature. So now I've got this BA in English literature, and I was one of those, वो फिल्मों में माँ कहती है ना, मेरा बेटा first class first आया. So I was one of those first class first nerds, right? But when I graduated from St. Xavier's, I had no idea what I really wanted to do. And a professor who was a substitute teacher said, listen, why don't you, I know Movie Magazine's looking for something, and why don't you just check it out? Like, as a stopgap arrangement before you figure out like whether you want to, because us waqt, Aseem, there were two choices. You went into advertising, which was the cool, hip thing to do, or you taught, because what else did English lit majors do, right? So I said, okay. And though my mother had already, she had written, my mom, Kamla Chandra, wrote Prem Rog for Raj Kapoor. She wrote Chandni for Yash Chopra. So there was a little bit of a Bollywood connection, but we were very much sort of South Bombay snobs. Totally. Like, you didn't cross the sort of whirly, line. And we were all like these, we were like, no, we're too cool for all of that. And then I get this job. And truthfully, it's not like I grew up loving the movies, but I fell in love with the film industry before I fell in love with the movies, because it was just this gloriously chaotic, larger than life space. And at that time, it's very hard for people now to even think about it. But like early 90s, late 80s, it was like, you had a secretary. Each actor had one secretary, and that was it. It wasn't your entourage manager. So kuch nahi tha, right? So you just called the secretary. You said, "Oh, us studio mein kaun hai?" Then you showed up at the studio. Then you did your interview. There were like maybe 15 of us covering cinema across like 4 mag. There was Filmfare, Movies, Star and Style, Stardust, right? Those were the magazines. But I just fell head over heels in love with the film industry. And then I thought that if I'm going to do this, I have to learn how to be a journalist. And then I went and got a master's in journalism from Northwestern University. Then I worked in New York for a year. And then I came back. It was so funny because in the early 90s, nobody came back. And if you said that you came back only because you have to write about Bollywood, they just looked at you like, Bichari, something really wrong with her.
But you have taken Bollywood to literally a level which is, I think, really very different than what was being done before. I mean, over the years, the interviews that you have done, not just Film Companion, but the other work, etc. Also, it's not gossipy. Although there's always a touch of gossip. Everybody likes gossip. We're all human beings, etc.
Absolutely.
But digging deeper into conversations with actors and filmmakers, etc. I mean, there are you and there are a few other people, including a dear friend of yours and mine, Rajiv Masan. Some people have been able to, but it's hats off to people like you, and especially you with your channel Film Companion. You even have the Film Companion South. The level of conversation that happens there. It was completely lacking. And I think it is really, you're bringing a very different kind of interest in cinema. It's not just watching it. People want to know not just what Bhardwaj Rangan reviews, but the conversations he has with the directors then. Absolutely. And likewise with you also. And so I think it's very remarkable, so obviously the passion that you bring into it. You mentioned about trying to figure out what's happening, and you would drop by right at the beginning in the Amitabh Bachchan section. You write, I think you would drop by some studio and you ask, "Kaun hai yahan pe?" And they said, "Amitabh Bachchan hai." You would go totally unprepared to do the interviews also.
It was at that time, I think it was literally like, of course, there were the secretaries and some interviews were set up because you would just call. And remember, this is pre-cell phones. You're calling everybody on landlines, right? So you would set up, of course, you would set up some interviews, but then you did which was studio rounds. It was called studio rounds. I see. You literally just went from studio to studio and you talked to the people who were there. And it was a lot of fun. It was also a very immediate immersion because it wasn't as controlled. Right now it's all very, very, every conversation is I wouldn't say design, that would be unfair to the artist, but it is controlled. You have access, you are told that please don't ask X, Y, and Z question. There is all of that. At that time, there was very little of it. It was a much more informal sort of relationship.
The PR is also there. They're tape recording the interview while you're doing the interview also. You cannot even make up a quote anymore, which people used to at least. But it's fascinating that even despite all of the control, as a journalist, you can thrive and you can still bring a lot out. I think also over the years, you've developed this relationship with the industry, some of the actors and all the actors and directors, etc. They feel comfortable talking to you about, that's the whole journey there. And I'm wondering how that developed as such. You were always somewhat of an insider. your mother was there.
Yeah.
You're married to one of the biggest, most successful producer, I think, in Bollywood industry now. But but you keep that aside. I mean, you never review their films, you never talk about them with your work and all.
Yeah.
How did your journey sort of grow to reach on film journalist in Bollywood? You are. No, seriously, I think everybody.
You're embarrassing me. No.
That's what my whole intent is, for the 40 minutes to embarrass you only. But I think people need to learn also about, like, when you said you started off and you would make these landline calls, and from there to today, give us a sense of how does that happen?
Aseem, if there's one thing that I think, I generally come to it from a place of love. I'm not here to pull down anybody's work. Because I'm married to a film director, I know how hard it is to make a film. I've been there. I've seen him struggle. I've been on the opposite ends. I've seen the bad reviews. I know what it is from both sides of it, right? So I'm genuinely here because I love the movies and I love people who make the movies. And for me, that's the number one thing. So there is no agenda. There's no, I think people are also comfortable perhaps because I'm not trying to be smarter than anyone. You know what I'm saying? I'm just trying to get to, like, wow, how did you create that? So I come to it from a place of, like, I'm just so excited to be here and to do this. And generally that has not faded over 25 plus years. And in fact, I was talking to Raja Sen, who was also one of our friends and colleagues. And he said to me that, I stopped reviewing this sort of weekly reviewing grind. He said, Rajiv's out of it. He said, you're the only one who's just going on and on.
Right.
And I said, I just love it. And I think, Aseem, if there's anything I've learned, honestly, I'm not a big one for giving gyan because, like, what do I know? But what I've learned in this journey is that I think if you just come to it from a place of honesty and hard work, you have to be honest. It doesn't matter if so-and-so's, I can't say I have friends in the business, but, obviously, people, because like you said, now I've done this for so long, we've grown up together, but you have to be honest. I think if you come from a place of dishonesty, even if it means, camouflaging what you really feel, I think that you can't sustain this for very long. You can't take sides. You can't have agendas.
Right.
I think you keep your head down and you keep working. Yeah, that's it.
Right. No, that's very important because, and you focus on your work. I mean, the little bit jealousy some people will have or do whatever. If you keep.
What can you do with that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Uska kya karoge?
Exactly.
And the thing is, like, I find even so for a lot of my career, there wasn't social media, right? That only happened literally 10 years ago. And for me, it's been an amazing learning curve because you do get instant feedback, but you also have to learn to let the negativity go because there's nothing you can do with it.
So coming back to the book again, 50 films that you have, we talked about why you started with Sholay. Tell us about the thought that went into the other films. I mean, you have a very interesting mix of it. And it's not all Bollywood. It is, you've got films from the South, some of the current ones, Kumbalingi Nights and, Super Deluxe. And you have, art house independent films. You have films that have traveled to film festivals. How did you go through the process? And then you have to write on each of them. And I can tell that, you're not pulled from your reviews.
No.
Did you watch the films again?
I watched again. Yeah. Because that was important. The process was really like films that over the years have really evoked a response. I didn't want it. I mean, for me, genuinely, I mean, you are far more sort of, I don't know, what's the right word? Watched, or your frame of reference is far more vast than mine. Mine has been very Bollywood. So I only, Aseem, in the last 2.5-3 years, really discovered the gems across the country that we have, the brilliant filmmaking that is happening outside of Bollywood.
Right.
And these films have really kind of sustained me at a time where really genuinely Hindi cinema, and especially mainstream Hindi cinema, has been very, very just disappointing. And I feel like I'm like that with a parasite on a tree type plant hota hai na, because you will only flourish if the main tree is flourishing, right? And if that main guy is like just not there. But these are the movies. Kumbalangi Nights was one of the earliest sort of Malayalam films I saw. Just fell in love with the artistry of it. So my thought was really just to mix it up. And my hope, Aseem, is that they're the big ones, right? There's Dil Chahta Hai, there's Chak De India.
Right.
Everybody's seen those. Everybody's loved those.
You're going back
Mughal Azam, right? My hope is that, it might evoke some nostalgia in people. It might make them want to revisit. But also, I hope if this book can lead you to some things you didn't know, to films you didn't ever think of seeking out, that would be lovely.
Yeah. No, but I think one of the contributions, and I don't want to keep embarrassing you, praising you or something like that. One of the contributions that you've done through Film Companion, for instance, is that you mentioned Kumbalangi Nights, for instance. I've watched some of the interviews you've done with these, younger filmmakers, Malayalam language or Kannada or Tamil filmmakers. They may be big stars in their own world. They are. But the moment they come on your show, I mean, people have watched them, but the moment they come to the show, you've actually given them a sort of an all-India universal, appeal. And I can see on their faces this joy. I mean, it's a very different look they have than somebody like Deepika Padukone or Ranveer Singh will have, because these people are, they're like, wow, this is like really, you open the world for them.
But thank you, Aseem. I just... for me, that was always the ambition with Film Companion. That it would be a pan-India platform, that we would sort of cross-pollinate. And as it turned out, this wasn't like who could have ever foreseen any of what has transpired in our lives in the last 3 years. But as it turned out, that's the way industries also moved. The interaction right now between the Telugu film industry and the rest of the country is huge. Between the Tamil film industry, and look at the level of sort of cross-pollination, and it's fantastic. I think it can only help. I think, वो क्या बोलते हैं ना, वो well में मेंढक बैठे रहो, उससे क्या होता है?
I know. You just keep hearing your own echo.
That's right. And I think that their level of storytelling is just so phenomenal that we should learn from them.
No, absolutely. And this last year, 2021, itself, even 2021, I mean, the Hindi film industry was almost so disappointing. Every week, practically, we were being, bombarded with films, Malayalam films, especially Tamil films on Amazon Prime. And it's like, how many can we even watch? Even though we are stuck at home, also all of us. And 70-80% of them are really very good. They were all very worth watching, and everyone's discovering now, new filmmakers, of course, new actors, and I think that's been really wonderful. Again, coming back to the book. The decisions that you had to make, the fact when you have only 50 films and you wanted to go all the way back to Mughal Azam also, the films that you left out. Now, I see you don't have DDLJ in it.
Yeah.
You've written a book on DDLJ.
I've written a book on it. I figure what is there to add, And DDLJ is still, I think, very much in the conversation. Because there is so much nostalgia for the 90s. Everybody knows DDLJ.
Yeah, no, and then the chapter on Aditya Chopra toward the end, so the DDLJ comes. So I'm just curious about the choices you made, and there's also a limit in terms of how many pages the book has to be. For instance, some of the films that you decided you cannot. I mean, I don't know if you can mention some films that you really wanted to add and you couldn't. Or while you were watching, I'm sure when you were watching, it's not like, did you make a list of all the 50 films and said, okay, this is what I'm going to write about?
No. I was, I knew like some of them, of course, like films I would want to include. But there were others that I kind of thought about. I read up again. I tried to recall, Hazaro Khwaishein, which is a film that I loved when I saw, but then over the years kind of I forgot. And then, I said, no, I have to go back and, revisit it because I remember loving it. And then it was just so wonderful to see it again and to see how much it holds up. So it was a sort of trial and error, but genuinely, I say, as you know, as somebody who watches films also, there is always going to be enough for a sequel and another and a part three, because how can we decide? We love so many things.
I think one of the most beautiful things about revisiting a film like Hazar Khwaishein, for instance, with Hazaro Khwaishein, which again I saw about 3-4 years ago once it came on Netflix. It takes you back to what you were when you saw the film.
Yeah.
And it's a lovely sort of a hello introduction to yourself 25 years ago, 20 plus years ago. And
absolutely.
Then you say, like, has the film dated or is the film still relevant? Then you start to say, like, how you changed and how relevant you are from that time period also. Really.
Yeah, it's lovely. And these are all, I think, really fine films. I'm not saying this is a sort of a canon and, this is the 100 greatest or whatever. It's not. These are just films that have spoken to me.
Yeah. I love the fact that you have a chapter on Aditya Chopra toward the end. And tell us about, and then of course you have one on Karan, but Karan and you have grown, as you said, the growth in terms of in the industry itself. And Karan is a very, very fascinating person. And Karan has become sort of the, I joked with him like he's the godfather of Bollywood, the current Bollywood in a lot of ways. But Aditya Chopra, the quietest man that you would ever meet. And what has he done? I mean, there are very few people who do that, to take over their father's very, very successful business and take it to a completely new, different level. So tell us about writing about him.
I've been fascinated by him since we first met, which was actually pre-Dar. He cut the promos for Dar, and I remember watching those promos. At their house, and thinking like, wow, this is such a bright kid. He's so, he was always trying to push the envelope in some way or the other. And those promos were really cutting edge for that time, because at that time, nobody was making any promos. It was just, songs. And I actually almost convinced him to be one. I did a piece for India Today magazine on sort of the next generation of Bollywood, because after Hum Aapke Hain Kaun and DDLJ, like everything changed. This industry, which was run mostly by older men, became sort of suddenly overrun by young people. And I almost convinced him, and he said yes. He said yes to do that interview for India Today. But just as I was about to leave the office, I got a call, again, landline, pre-cell phone. And he said, Anu, I'm just not comfortable. I don't feel I deserve this. I don't. And this was before DDLJ had released. So, he hadn't made his debut. But I thought he was just smartest man and had to be kind of showcased in some way. And he was like a really sort of the big hope for Hindi cinema. But he said no.
And you think that this was not a television interview you're going to be doing. This was going to be print.
It was print. But it was me and a photographer heading to the Yash Raj office. And he said no. He said, listen, if I'm ever comfortable, I'll call you. And since then, we've known each other because of my mother's connection. I wrote the book. I finally convinced him to do the book. That itself, I was like, Adi, this is the British Film Institute.
Right,
It's an honor. Yeah. It's an honor, it's not going anywhere else. It's not going into any magazine. And, once he opened up, he really spoke. He really talked, and it was lovely. But for him, it's just, he said, I'm just not invested in publicity. And that's a remarkable thing, given the time we live in.
Yeah. Very different than his brother, actually, who...
Absolutely.
The other person, of course, you have Priyanka Chopra there, who just became a mother today. She announced, so congratulations to her. The one person I'm really surprised that you added in your book is Diljit Dosanjh. I'm sure it must have been really a very delightful experience for you to meet him, because he comes across as a very genuine kind of a person. But tell us about that decision, about why to write a chapter on him in the book.
Aseem, because I find him so inspiring. we met before Urta Punjab released.
Yeah.
He had already done a film called 1984, which I watched and really, really liked. And so I reached out to the director. I said, can you connect me to Diljit? He was, of course, I knew he was acting in Urta Punjab, but it was a few months even before release. So there was no publicity. We just knew him as a Punjabi actor and a Punjabi singer, but he was very good in 1984. And, that interview, Aseem, he was so himself. He had no interest in trying to portray any kind of image. He had no interest in trying to kind of camouflage the fact that his English isn't good. He was just like, and it was great because he said कि मैं तो पंजाबी बोलता हूँ और मेरी तो हिंदी भी टूटी फूटी सी है. So somehow, see, we connected and we spoke, and he was so honest about who he is and where he comes from and the thrill it gives him to be on a set with Kareena Kapoor and drink coffee. He said, हमारे लिए तो वो coffee का mug ही बहुत बड़ी चीज है. And and then cut to literally 4 years later, and he's like a brand ambassador for everything. He's this big sort of global star. He has a massive following everywhere, and he's a mainstream Hindi film hero. Yeah. Which with a pagadi, with a turban, with a pug. And he said to me that when he started out in Punjabi cinema, they told him, you can't make it till you get rid of that. And he said कि मुझे तो लगता है कि साफ नियत से काम करते जाओ तो result मिल ही जाता है. And look at even now, Aseem, when he's so successful, he's so famous, you see him battling with Siri on his Instagram. Those stories he puts up. It's just fabulous, and I love it because he's just himself. He hasn't changed, and I think there's so much to learn from that.
That is true. There's a question that we would love to hear from you. Please give some tips to budding cinema journalists and school children interested in writing. आपसे पूछा गया.
I think just watch as much as you can, and now it is possible. Aseem, when you and I were young, it was struggle. I remember there were theaters, and then there was in Bombay, there was one Akashvani theater where they played art house movies, but that was it. Like there was very, very little exposure. But I feel like people growing up today have such a massive advantage over us because you can watch a lot, and even for free on YouTube, right? So I think expose yourself to as much as you can, read as much as you can, and your critics who speak to you. I still try every week to sit down and read Anthony Lane or A.O. Scott or Manola Dargis. Because I just feel like you learn every day. And so I think that watching, reading, and then writing, you have to be able to come to a place where you're confident, of your opinion, and then you hone your own voice.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I mean, people really need to watch a lot more films. They think, everybody watches films, so likh lenge. You need to go to
this attitude, Aseem, has been there like I see so often in major publications, even like film review, wo to koi bhi likh lega.
Exactly.
But that's not true. You have to come with an informed, from an informed place.
You talked about A.O. Scott and Anthony Lane. There's a lovely little section you write about Roger Ebert.
Meeting him
in the Khan section, and by that time he had lost his jaw or something, right? So, and
he could speak, Aseem. So we connected over Twitter. Which is why Twitter will always have a place in my heart. Because it enabled me to meet one of my heroes.
Right.
And he, by that time, he had cancer of the throat. He had so he couldn't speak anymore. He would write and of course type and be. He was very, very active online. And we connected on Twitter, and he emailed me, and we were both, and he said, see, when you're just posting, like you're communicating just online, you forget. And I said, oh, great, my God, I'm so excited. I said, Roger, I'll just call you. And he said, no, you can't call me. I can't speak. And I was just like, oh my God. Because he was so full of life. He was so full of passion. You couldn't even imagine that this is a man who's in that place. And it was like really a dream come true to meet him.
Yeah, his words were so strong on Twitter that it's really hard to imagine that this man cannot speak. I mean, I saw him actually at TIFF one of the times, and he was walking by, and you could see his condition, and I took my camera out to take a picture, and he had that perpetual smile on his face because of his cancer thing. But he said, no, like that. I could tell he was not comfortable. And I immediately did not take the picture because, it would have been really embarrassing. It would have been, it wasn't right at all.
Right. But he was so gracious, and it was just so lovely. I mean, I can't say I spent a lot of time. It must have been, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes. And he was scribbling questions, and I was answering and asking him questions, and he was scribbling answers. But it was just one of those Janam Safal moments,
Right. Yeah. Any other such film personalities who you met over the years who've you've been really excited? I mean, you have, of course, you met everybody in the Indian film industry, of course. But
that's
okay.
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think who else. With him, it was a sort of almost reverence. Aseem, I feel like for all film critics, he's touched us in ways.
Right.
He's taught us in ways. So I feel like there's nobody really who has that place for me.
Yeah, he was also very down to earth. I've actually talked to him and met him. Very approachable. He used to come to the Telluride Film Festival every year, and you could just walk up to him. You could walk up to him and talk. And there are journalists, there are film critics who are very standoffish. You cannot approach them. There's a invisible barrier that they have around them. But he didn't have that. There's another question: what skills should one nurture and acquire as a professional to become a good movie critic, besides an unending love for cinema?
I think, like I said before, the skill to watch and not, and to come in to every film from a place of love and optimism. I think what happens, especially when you do this weekly, it is a grind, right? And you see a lot of stuff. People think it's the cushiest job in the world. And I'm not saying it's rocket science. We're not curing cancer. But you are watching a lot of bad films, okay? And you know that, Aseem, running a film festival, you watched a lot of really
but you have to watch them.
Stuff.
You have to watch them before you reject them, right?
Exactly. So you can't be a selective film critic. You can't be somebody who comes in to say, oh, I will be a snob, or I will look down on a commercial Hindi film that is attempting to appeal to the masses. I will only be interested in the lunchbox and Masan. You can't be that person. Of course, we all have our biases. Of course, we all have our soft spots, and we'll have films that just, I can't watch a lot of violence on screen. I'm, just a lot of blood makes me physically kind of recoil. But you can't decide before कि इसमें क्या है, ये तो rubbish ही होगी. वो नहीं हो सकता. So you have to hone that tool, which allows you to come in with saying that, okay, this is going to be great, or come in with hope. At least hope.
So once again, what do you want young readers especially to take away from this book? And especially when you go all the way back to a film like Mughal-e-Azam. I mean, hats off to, everybody, even if this current generation has seen Chak De India, for instance. But so just give us a sense of why people should be reading the book. I think people should read the book.
Thank you. Well, I hope people read the book to discover titles and stories that they may not know. So it's not strictly reviews. I kind of use them also to kind of take off and talk about what Hindi cinema was like, what the Hindi film industry was like, but also perhaps to discover movies that you may not know about. I think be open. I think you'll really gain so much as a viewer, as I've learned in the last 2.5, 3 years, by just watching stuff that is out of your comfort zone. So I hope that I can lead people to kind of cross that Lakshman Rekha, and as Bong Joon-ho said, get over the 1-inch subtitle Yeah,
Right.
and watch a lot
Right.
of movies.
Right. No, and one of the good things, the great things you've done in the book is that at the end of every chapter, you write if the film is available, where they can watch it,
Yeah,
if it is YouTube or Netflix, Amazon Prime, or wherever.
yeah,
Because immediately somebody can jump and say, okay, this is a film I can watch tonight, this evening, or something like that. So I think
absolutely.
that's very important because नहीं तो लोग भूल जाते हैं नहीं तो हाँ.
Yeah.
So yeah. So Anupama, thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. The book is called A Place in My Heart. Anupama Chopra. It's available at bookstores, online, wherever people want to order. And congratulations. And I'm amazed how you were able to do all this work, really. As I said, you're a super woman, super human being. But congratulations. And I wish we could have done this publicly, in person, but, hopefully another session
Someday.
for your next book.
Bilkul. Bilkul. Aseem, thank you. And thank you to Oxford Bookstore. Thank you to the APJ Festival. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.